Hey y'all, hi. It's time for another video about new makeup releases. I'm going to be giving you my hot takes. And before I give you my hot takes, I'm going to give you the dictionary definition of a hot take. In journalism, a hot take is a piece of deliberately provocative commentary that is based almost entirely on shallow moralizing. In response to a news story, in this case, a beauty news story, usually written on tight deadlines with little research or reporting and even less thought. The research, reporting, and thought that have gone into these hot takes basically consist of me going on Trend Mood, the Instagram account, and pulling up the slides of a bunch of makeup products that I want to talk about, looking at them for a little while and thinking about what I'm going to say. So the takes are really pretty hot. If this is your first time to my channel, then welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Hannah. I love beautiful things. I really like paying attention to what's new to the makeup market. I'm interested in aesthetic trends and I love makeup, but I don't like buying too much. So my hot takes often take this angle, like thinking about why this is on the market, why they think that it's going to sell, what's going on in beauty, but trying to talk myself back from the impulse to buy the thing if the thing is engendering that impulse. If that sounds good to you, I hope you'll subscribe. And now let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. How are we feeling about this look? Have you written a comment about it already? You know when Trixie Mattel says, "Is it okay to love yourself?" That's kind of how I'm feeling today in this look. Is it okay to love yourself? This is my 5-minute makeup look on steroids, the 5-minute makeup look for my Rose Inc makeup review. And I actually filmed myself putting on this makeup. I filmed it as a Patreon video, a really juicy, long get ready with me that's going to go up on Patreon tomorrow. So if you're a patron, get ready. If not, and you'd like to be, click the link below and go subscribe. You can become one of my patrons for as little as $1 a month, and there are bonus videos over there on Patreon. The second thing I have to tell you is this, and I'm sorry that I have been forgetting to mention this for months now. My beautiful friend, Julia Frodal, not the Julia with whom I live, not the Julia in whose dining room I'm currently sitting as I film, another Julia, but another very old and very good and very brilliant friend. She runs this class, which is now called Building a More Compassionate World. It's a 6-week immersion course in compassion, the principles of compassion. I took this class around this time last year. It might have been more like November, December of last year. And it is truly life-changing. And I talked about it on my channel then, mentioned it several times since then. I was going to try to remember to mention it right before it started every time, because she teaches it for 6 weeks and then takes a break and then teaches it for 6 weeks again. It's online, but I've been forgetting the last couple of times, and I'm not forgetting this time. Tomorrow is the first day of the next 6-week series. I'm going to put the link down below. I strongly recommend just clicking through to check it out, even if you're vaguely interested, because she now offers it on a sliding scale, which is really amazing. It's not free. It's how she makes her living, and all of her life's work, research, schooling, and brilliance have gone into it. So it totally makes sense that it would cost money to take it. But she is so generous, and I think feels so strongly that these teachings are important for the world, which they are. I feel that way too. That's why I'm talking about it on YouTube, that she's making it affordable, even if you can't pay what the class should cost, given how much work she's done to put it together and how brilliant she is. A brief quote from her website that will probably instantly give you a sense of why this class was so valuable to me. This course will give you insights and tools to help you navigate internal and external difficulties with more grace, and to abide more often with the wise and effective skills of compassion. And with that, let's get into the deliberately provocative commentary. I don't know how compassionate I'm being towards these corporations, but you know, corporations aren't actually people. I feel compassion for all of us who are under the thumb of this intense advertising and the desire, our own desire to buy things, and the way that those two things can combine. I'm trying to kind of like make space for us with videos like this. Okay, Marc Jacobs Beauty. I haven't done, this is like the epitome of little research or reporting, because I pulled it up because I had a hot take because of the picture. And I'll tell you what that was. But now I'm seeing in the copy on the side that there's actually all this business going on with Marc Jacobs. The picture, I looked at this, I thought it was Wet n Wild. And then I saw it was Marc Jacobs. I was like, what the butt? This, I just feel like Wet n Wild did have, for a long time, or maybe still does have, a circular compact with 3 stripes of pigmented powder. Pigmented powder, what am I talking about? Makeup, 3 stripes of cheek makeup that looked just like this. But did you think there's something about the just run-of-the-mill, if you have a very run-of-the-mill bronzer shade, like this mid-tan, that is just like, back when there used to just be only one color of bronzer that everyone came out with, and there was no bronzer for deep skin tones, there was no bronzer for pale skin tones, but the makeup world was just like, this is the color of bronzer. That color, if you take that color and you put it next to pink blush, this basic, the most basic pink blush like this, and you put that next to like a very basic pale champagne or pale pink highlighter, and you put them together in a pan and you're like, this is what we're selling you. It just looks like bargain basement, bottom of the barrel business. You know what I'm really trying to say? It looks dated. I feel like it looks dated when it's like this. And I just looked at this and I was like, this looks like a picture of Wet n Wild makeup from 2005. That was my feeling. Then I saw that it was Marc Jacobs and I was scandalized. And I was like, that's my hot take, done and dusted. And that was all I was going to say. But now I see that the brand's current licensing agreement is expiring and they are exploring opportunities with a new licensing partner. So I guess that Marc Jacobs was one of those kendo brands, like only in Sephora. Maybe they're moving elsewhere because it's in their best interest, or maybe they're being kicked out of Sephora. But what we know, we don't know. But what we do know is that it seems like Marc Jacobs is making noises like they are going to continue on, but just maybe not in their current form. And so the big stink is that they're on sale. Oh no, it's all being discontinued. Everything's being discontinued. I actually do have a hot take about this because I was a real, especially before my no-buy year, I was a real sucker for fancy brands. And I was still kind of a sucker for fancy brands. I mean, we know I'm a sucker for fancy stuff. And Marc Jacobs is one of those very compelling fancy brands. And so as I was like, ooh, it's Marc Jacobs, it's probably the best ever, it's probably so amazing, you know? And I'm sure that there have been some really beautiful products from Marc Jacobs. I mean, I know that there have. I've used some really beautiful products from Marc Jacobs before. But it's interesting when something like this happens, the bubble bursts instantly and you're just like, oh, they're just being discontinued and it's just like going away. And that thing that we thought was aspirational, that we thought we were trying to climb inside of and be a part of, it's just when you realize that it can dissolve overnight simply for the reason that like a contract between one corporation and another expired, you realize how false that sense of being a part of something, some sort of like magical aesthetic world or society, community, you realize how much that sense was something that the corporation created to sell you stuff. And I don't know, it's like that with all of this, almost all of this. I mean, I think that's why I like small brands so much, because often they are actually passion projects and it is actually someone with whom you are connected. But there's nothing like the dissolution of a brand like Marc Jacobs, although I know they might launch again somewhere else, but the temporary dissolution and discontinuation of all of these products, there's nothing like that to remind you that, I don't know, that like brands aren't places. Brands aren't like countries you can visit. Brands aren't actually cultures, especially not big brands. Let's move on. I feel like this is getting a little bit, I know what I'm trying to say. I don't know if I've completely succeeded in saying it. And sometimes you have to just cut your losses and move on. Oh, this is like a hot take as well. So, maybe I should just check and see and make sure nothing else has been peek sneaked since last night. Yeah, there's nothing else new about this. So when I say this, what I mean is this slide with holiday sneak peeks that is up on Trend Mood. There's a bunch of stuff I don't care about on here, like a Tarte palette, a Too Faced palette, some Makeup Forever lipsticks, skincare, everything like that. And in amongst it, there's a mini Natasha Denona 5-pan. I think it's a mini. Okay, this is new makeup releases hot takes. The rest of it, the second time around. Hi, it's the next day. Something happened. Misfortune struck while I was filming. The hard drive that we record onto filled up and stopped recording without any signal or notification on the screen. It's never happened before, so I didn't know that there wasn't going to be any kind of error message when that happened. Usually we make sure that there's enough room on the hard drive. It was just like a series of unfortunate events, or a series of events none of which were unfortunate, but that all together led to the unfortunate event of me continuing to talk to the camera like an imbecile for like an hour and 15 minutes, even after it had stopped recording. I didn't find out until I was completely done giving all of my hot takes that only one of them had been captured. And I didn't have time to re-record yesterday because as soon as I was done, I had to start cooking dinner, and I'm not even sure I would have had the wherewithal to re-record because it was a blow. But I woke up this morning ready to go, although I put on a little bit like of a less psychotic version of the 5-minute face today, and, you know, a little more casual of an outfit because I sit before you a slightly demoralized Hannah Louise Poston. Morale is a little bit lower. And the most crushing thing is that these takes are no longer going to be quite as hot as they were yesterday because I've already like talked through all my thoughts and feelings. So I'm basically giving you like lukewarm to actually slightly cool takes. Like these takes are even a bit nippy takes. These are like sweater weather takes, but I hope you'll enjoy them anyway. And actually the first thing I'm going to do is refresh Trend Mood to see if anything has been announced since yesterday. And then I can at least give you a hot take, but actually I don't think anything has. Yeah, there's nothing new that I want to talk about. Let's just pick up where we left off. I was looking at this slide that shows a bunch of sneak peeks of holiday releases. Most of them are boring, the house down boots. But then there's this 5-pan palette from NATASHA DENONA, which is like a mini 5-pan. The thing about these minis, I think when she started, she was imagining that she would make like mini versions of her iconic palettes. So the Star palette was and kind of is still iconic in the NATASHA DENONA brand. And so she came out with a mini Star, which is just miniature versions of 5 of the eyeshadows that are actually in the Star palette. It's literally a very tight edit and very small pans version of the actual Star palette. It seems that after that experiment, NATASHA reconsidered and she was like, how about we do it another way? Let's switch it up in 2 ways. One of the ways in which she switched it up makes a lot of sense to me. She started coming out with mini palettes that don't actually share eyeshadows with the larger versions. So the mini gold, for example, has 5 eyeshadows that aren't actually in the larger gold palette, like the original gold palette. They complement it, they go with it. It's like an addendum to it. It's something that you can add on to like an extension pack. The mini gold palette is like an extension pack. And I actually think the Lila might have been the first, the mini Lila might have been the first style with 5 shadows that are in the Lila palette. But then beyond that, she started just doing these like add-on palettes, add-on mini palettes to her famous palettes, her larger palettes. So that makes a lot of sense to me because I never bought the mini gold because, you know, I'm pretty conservative when it comes to like buying new eyeshadow and I didn't feel like I desperately needed it. But part of me wants it. Even though I have the gold palette, I still want this other one because it's like extra to the gold palette and it's stuff that I don't technically own in NATASHA DENONA's formula and that aren't actually in, shadows that aren't actually in the gold palette. So as a consumer, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me from a business point of view. Kind of makes sense to me from an artistic point of view as well. My guess is that what was going on with the Star and Lila minis is that anyone who owned the full-size palette wasn't buying the mini. And now the way she's doing it, people who own the full-size palette are maybe going to be like the first in line to try the mini. So that makes sense to me. The other thing that she did, the second way in which she switched it up, I don't understand quite as well. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just don't understand why it's happening this way. And it's this. She started releasing the mini palettes as like a preview of coming attractions. So the mini Xenon palette has been released and we all assume that there's going to be a midi-sized Xenon palette following because that's what happened with the mini Retro, for example. And I think that there was one other that was like that. It's as though the mini palette is letting you know that there is a midi palette coming down the pipe that's going to have this color story. It's going to be different shadows, but it's going to be this general color story. So it's like, go ahead and buy the mini now and get excited for the larger palette, like the full-size palette that's going to be along the lines of this theme. Maybe there's some reason that releasing things that way drives more sales, maybe drives more sales of the minis. Like people buy the minis before the maxis and then they can't help themselves and they buy the, or not the maxis, but the midi palettes. They can't help themselves and they buy the midi palette as well. Maybe that's the case. Maybe when you release like a large palette and then the mini, people are less likely to buy the mini because they already have the big one. Maybe. Whatever it is, that's what she's doing. And the fact that that's what she's doing makes me really intrigued by this little mini palette here because it looks like the gold palette. 4 of the shades in here look like they might actually be shades that are in the gold palette, like the matte mustard, the kind of coppery gold. It's a little bit hard to tell if that glittery blue-green, that kind of like deep glittery Prussian teal, is the exact glittery kind of blackened topper that's in the gold palette or that was in the now discontinued gold palette. It's hard to tell if that's exactly what that is or if it's just a metallic in the same color. And then this like sandy, taupey, brown, utilitarian matte that's in there. They just all, it looks like a condensed version of the gold palette. And then there's this kind of like cream colored matte. A lot of people have theorized that since the full-sized gold palette is being discontinued, and I made a whole video about this, and if you're curious about the gold palette or my feelings about it, it's a video about why you don't need to freak out about the gold palette being discontinued and why you might not need it, even if you're feeling like you wish you'd bought it. I'll link that down below in case you want to click through and watch it. In the comments on that video, I saw that there's this theory going around, which is that she's discontinued the larger gold palette because she's going to re-release it, either the exact same color story in the midi size, like the $65 size, or a similar palette, something that contains many of the same shades, but is kind of like an updated version of the gold palette. And the thing that would make sense to me about that is that the gold palette itself, which is such a beloved palette as far as I can tell in the Natasha Denona range, it was discontinued with no fanfare. Like it just seemed like it sort of quietly faded away. And I think that if she was planning to re-release it as a midi, that's what she would do. Or if she was planning to release like Gold Palette 2.0 as a midi, that is what she would do, because it would feel a little bit disingenuous or kind of like a bait and switch if she were to be like, the gold palette's discontinued, get it while you can. Like, there are only a couple left, you gotta buy it now, we're so sorry to see it go. If they were to drum up like excitement and drama around it being discontinued and then turn around a couple months later and release like a new gold palette, people would feel like they had been tricked, you know? All I'm trying to say is this. I look at this mini and I'm like, is this a mini of Gold Palette 2.0? Is this like a preview of coming attractions? Because if it is, then what it's previewing is a palette that looks a lot like the gold palette did. And so what is that palette? I want to know what this is called. Is it called Mini Gold 2.0? I'm just curious. I'm curious because the gold palette is part of my story. And Natasha Denona is a brand in which I have an interest. I'm just curious about what's going to happen. But I also saw in the comments that some people are saying this looks like it is 5 shades from the Metropolis palette, and that maybe it's like maybe it's the mini Metropolis, like a condensed version of the Metropolis palette, which could mean that it has absolutely nothing to do with the gold palette, and that gold palette's the furthest thing from Natasha Denona's mind, and that we're not getting a revamped version, and this isn't even a preview of coming attractions. It's just a mini version of a palette that was supposed to be limited edition, but is still around, even though the gold palette wasn't and is gone. Anyway, what do we think? Do we think this is a mini Metropolis? Do we think that this is a mini Gold 2.0? Do we think there's going to be another version of the gold palette? Do you think that Kava and Sparks will ever grace the market again? Do you have more information than I do? Because I clearly know nothing. Let's move on. The next slide that I pulled up to talk about is the slide announcing the KALEIDOS Apple collection, but it's not really a hot take. I mean, I'll give you my hot take on like the colors and the formula and stuff because they did send this to me. So I was actually wearing it. The reason it made sense to talk about it when I was filming yesterday is that the lip that I had on yesterday is a lip that is in this formula, which I'm actually not sure that it's one from the Apple collection. I don't think it is. I think it's from the Sandcastle bundle, but it's the same formula. And it's an interesting formula. It's sort of like a pretty beefy whipped product, and really easy to apply, really easy to get that soft, buffed out lip line. And then it's not like it sets down like a liquid lipstick, but it does kind of like change a little bit on your lips and become more sturdy. And then it lasts for a really long time. It is kind of like a hybrid between a lip cream and a liquid lipstick. I was wearing it yesterday, and then, I was wearing it when I was filming, and then I like cooked dinner, ate dinner, did a bunch of tasks, edited another video, and then I went to wash my face and it was like still on. I mean, it looked exactly like it had when I was filming. And, I don't have very many lip products that behave that way. So it's pretty sturdy. I said in the Patreon video in which I was applying it, I talked about the formula, and I said what I'll tell you now. I don't love the formula. It's not like my favorite thing to reach for. The thing that I tend to reach for by default is like the kind of thing that I'm wearing today, the Aaron's Faces Tinted Lip Balm, which is so beautiful. And I don't know, just really nourishing and absolutely lovely. It's in the shade Flushed. I love it. This is the kind of thing that I wear and wear and wear, but I think that Kaleidos has done a good job of picking colors that work with the formula. Or another way to say that is that I don't wear like the deep color that I had on for the first part of this video, that sort of like deep, grubby nude. That's a color that I don't wear very often on my lips, but if I'm going to wear it, then I kind of want it to be in a formula like this, a like blurry matte that isn't going to budge, because then I don't have to worry about it. So they did a really good job. It's like, it's appealing to me, even though it's not my first choice usually of a formula. It's appealing to me because they matched the formula to the colors and the colors to the formulas so well. Okay, let's talk about this Fenty face palette. I have kind of a hot take that it's kind of about this, but kind of about highlighter in general. And then I have a kind of a question, because maybe I don't have all the information about this. I have one of these. I have the original How Many Carats, the original Diamond Bomb. And the thing that's brilliant about it is that the base of it is sheer. It's literally like not sheer, literally clear. It's literally like a transparent sort of jelly gel that has glitters suspended in it. And the glitters, with How Many Carats, they don't have a color. They do have like a kind of shine, which is like a silver shine. So I guess they have a color, which is silver. It's like a gray shine as opposed to a super gold shine. But that color is in the reflect. It's in the shine. It's not like a veil of color that's put onto your skin. It's the color that shines back at you when you turn your head and it catches the light. The thing that's on your skin, the substance that's being spread over your skin, is actually completely sheer. It's like water, right? It's sheer like water, and it makes your skin look wet because the glitters are shining back. And because of that, it doesn't make very much sense to me to have 3 in a palette, because even though the color that shines back at you, the reflective part of it, might be slightly different with these 3 different products, each one of them, I think, has that sheer base. I think, and this is what I don't know, because the swatches here, these like super thick cream swatches, make it look like there's pigment in the product itself, in the base. So maybe How Many Carats is very, very sheer and then like completely transparent, colorless basically, with the glitter suspended in it. But maybe the other colors that she came out with in this formula have more pigment. But the swatches on the arms looks like they don't. It looks like they are 3 versions of How Many Carats, that totally clear base, with just 3 different colors of glitter mixed in, like 3 different colors of reflect. Because when a light is shining at you, and I'm saying like when the reflection from the cheek is shining at you, when it's shining at you, if whether it has like a slightly rosy tinge or like a slightly warm coppery tinge, as long as the differences are slight, it makes almost no difference, right? I think when it starts to make a real difference is when you get one that's like really strong blue shift, for example, or like a really, really strong yellow gold. Like then, yeah, that'll make a difference. But none of these 3 is that, right? We have like a rosy brown, a rosy copper, and a rosy rose. And even though I know they're not exactly the same, and obviously there's going to be these minor differences in the way that it shines back, this formula just seems to me like the bottom of the list of candidates for inclusion in a palette where there's like 3 different colors of it. Because my experience with How Many Carats is that it's such a universal formula because the base is completely transparent. So that's my hot take. Like that's why this confuses me a little bit. But then my question is, am I wrong about these different colored versions of this formula? Are they less transparent than How Many Carats? Are they less transparent than I'm kind of like imagining that they are? Because if they are, then maybe this makes a little bit more sense. But I still think that a highlighter palette in general, in most cases, it doesn't make all that much sense to me. It doesn't make as much sense to me as other kinds of face palettes. Okay, so this I have a serious interest in for a number of reasons. It's the Armani exclusive Eyes to Kill eyeshadow palette, but then they're like, but it's also a face palette, and it's kind of confusing. Here's my thought process behind this. I look at it and I remember when Hourglass tried to do this and failed spectacularly. Hourglass it's the only brand that I can think of that did this, like an eyeshadow palette where it's just sort of a landscape of the shadows like pressed together, you know? And when they came out with those, I was so compelled by them. They looked so beautiful and I really wanted to try one, but they were super expensive. I think that this was before my no buy year, actually. It was like when I was really deep in it. So I saw them and I was like, oh, be still my heart. I went to Sephora to look and they were like really tiny. Like they were so much smaller than they looked in person. It was like, actually, I remember what I said yesterday when I was in better spirits, and I'll let you know. It was like like if a doll was holding a postage stamp, and on that postage stamp, there was a picture of a doll holding a postage stamp. That's how big they were. That's what I said yesterday, but I feel like it made more sense. Well, I was like, what was wrong with me? Maybe it's good that I am refilming, because now that I say it back, it doesn't make sense. Anyway, I got to Sephora and I was like, I'm not spending money on this postage stamp on a postage stamp sized eyeshadow palette, but the landscaping was very beautiful. I love that. I just love it. Then I saw all these reviews saying that the formula performed terribly. The pan was unstable. It was sort of falling apart, crumbling, wasn't worth it, too expensive, blah, blah, blah. And then I think, you know, after not a very long while, Hourglass shelved that idea. And then they 3 or 4 years later came out with those like horrible, dated looking eyeshadow replacement system, which I talked about in another video. I'm not going to go down that path today. But as a side note, it seems to be snafu after snafu over in the eyeshadow department at Hourglass. And when I saw this, my first thought was like, oh, they've picked up what Hourglass put down and they're trying to do it right. And that's really exciting. And I love this like crystalline, it's like, is it crystals or is it floral? I really like that. I just think they've done a beautiful job. But when I saw the initial image, I thought that it was going to be quite small, like a little eyeshadow palette, quite little. And then when I scrolled through the slides and I saw the picture of it in someone's hand and I saw how big it is, then I got really excited because what a beautiful piece of makeup. It's like almost someone's holding it up and it's almost this big. It's a little bit shorter than this. But I mean, it looks like it's a kind of a huge, flat, beautifully packaged piece of makeup, like really, really special, really stunning. And when I read that they are selling it kind of like an eyeshadow palette that can also be used as highlighter and as blush, then that made more sense to me, because if they were marketing it that way, but it was tiny, people would be like, come on. But this way, it actually does feel like it could work like that. However, as an eyeshadow wearer, and especially as someone with hooded eyes, it doesn't seem like it would offer me very much in terms of eye looks. Like there's not dynamic range to the shades. It's the kind of thing where if you were to see it in black and white, almost all the colors would look the same. That means that they basically all have like the same level of saturation. They're all the same in that way in terms of like how deep or how light they are. The only thing grounding the palette, the only thing that offers any depth, are the 2 shades that I think are included sort of as blush shades, but they're not very deep. Like that kind of like red color, those mattes, that fuchsia and that red, I just know from experience that on the eyes, that kind of shadow tends to buff out to more like a mid-toned shade. There's nothing in here that I could use to deepen up my outer corner, to sculpt my eye, or if I did that, it would be just a very, very light effect, and it would be with these like fuchsia reds. So that's just a total miss for me. I actually feel like if they were marketing this as a face palette, it would make a lot more sense and it would be more successful. But since they're marketing as an eyeshadow palette that you can use on the cheeks if you want, I look at it as a consumer and I'm like, I can't get the eye looks that I want from this. Oh, let's talk about something that I actually do want to review and that I'm hoping to review. The DANESSA MYRICKS Infinite Chrome Flakes. I've been actually tagged in this a couple times on Instagram and I understand why, because look at the texture on the lids of these models. It's so out there and it's so good and I love it so much and I cannot wait to try one of these. However, I went on to, I think it was DANESSA MYRICKS website on the day that they were released for pre-order, and the couple of shades that I'm really attracted to were already sold out. So the one that I really want to review is Strobe Light. It's the clear one with like the multicolored reflex, and it's the upper right-hand corner. I would have settled for Shooting Star, which is the kind of like pale pinky one that's also kind of sheer, but they were both sold out. And I don't know, I didn't want to get a color that I knew that I wouldn't like as much, that I wouldn't use as much, because if I'm going to be reviewing it, I want to give the product the best chance of really impressing me and delighting me. And to do that, I know that I need to acquire the one that I am the most drawn to, because I feel like then I'll be able to give the most authentic review. Because if someone's going to buy one, they're going to buy the one that they're the most excited about. You know what I mean? So my review might come a little late, but I hope that it is coming. I just think that this is spectacular. And I know that some people are gonna be like, it looks weird, the texture, it looks like crocodile skin on the model's eyes, but that is exactly what I love about it. It's like a very accessible kind of editorial makeup, and it's just so DANESSA MYRICKS. This is why I love her makeup brand, because I love her makeup artistry so much. She is so brilliant. And then she made this brand that it's not like, I'm really good at makeup and I have this point of view, and here's some basic makeup products, and you can buy them because my name's attached, and then you can try to do what I do. It's like, I have this incredible point of view, this powerful style, and here are some products that derive from my point of view. It's like the products that she's formulated, that she's selling, are original and innovative in and of themselves because they derive directly from her original and innovative style. And that's really exciting to me. I just feel like that's the perfect way for a famous makeup artist to create a brand. And that's what she's done. And this is just like a clear continuation of that. So keep an eye out. I'm hoping that the color or the colors that I want to review will be available soon. And as soon as they are, I'll review them. Brief mention for the Charlotte Tilbury Smoky Eyes Are Forever palette. I will have already, when you're seeing this, I will have already posted my video duping the vibes of this, basically. It's like an overhead video where I look at the NATASHA DENONA Retro palette and I look at this palette and I make myself a little palette. This one right here. Make myself a little palette that is kind of like a hybrid of those two. And I'm going to be using this instead of buying either of those. So I talked in that video about what I like about this palette, but I just felt like I wanted to include it because Charlotte Tilbury has been coming out with these Eyes to Mesmerize palettes for a couple of years now, and none of them has ever really impressed me that much or made me want to consider it. I am not going to buy this, but I just love that there's a black and a brown in it. I feel like we haven't seen that in a long time. I feel like it's actually fallen out of style. Like, it's not the trend right now to include either a black or a brown, let alone both of them in a palette. But I, again, as someone with hooded eyes, I'm always trying to sculpt. I'm always doing even just a light, barely there version of a smoky eye. I'm always doing sort of some, not always, clearly. Today I'm not wearing any eye makeup. But when I do my eye makeup, I almost always add a little bit of smoke to the outer corner just to give my eyes a little bit more depth and structure because they are so hooded. And that means I'm always reaching for a black or a brown. And so if a palette doesn't have one of those in it, then I'm always having to like reach outside of that palette to get one. My personal preference is to have both because depending on the drama of the look or the other colors I've used, I might prefer one over the other. So that makes this very appealing to me. And then I appreciate what else she's done. I appreciate that there's this sort of green moment, there's this sort of ruddy moment. From the swatches, as far as I can tell, there are some like very iridescent, exciting shades. I just think that it's a combination of being on trend and of appealing to me specifically, things that are timelessly appealing to me. It's like those two things are combined in this palette. And so I just needed to give her a little bit of kudos, even though I don't need to buy it because I already have single eyeshadows that do the same thing. Oh my gosh, but the next one, you guys, I can't. I already did this yesterday and I still need a moment. I feel tongue-tied. I feel flushed. My hands are sweating. I think it's love. But I need to say right up front, as much for my own benefit as any of yours, this is a $150 eyeshadow palette that Gucci is selling. And if I'm going to spend $150 on an eyeshadow palette, I'm going to buy a Pat McGrath palette, which I've never done before. I've never even bought a Natasha Denona palette. The ones that I own, all of them were gifts. So I've never spent this amount, like $125, $150 on a single eyeshadow palette. And that's why I don't own a Pat McGrath Mothership palette, because I've tried Pat's formula. I love it. I love the formula. It's just the little palette that was sent to me for review didn't have any special shades in it. And it was all like pretty bright pinks. And so even though the formula was velvety and glorious and I really loved using it, it's being better served in someone else's collection. So I gave it away as a gift. That's the only Pat McGrath palette I've ever owned. And that one, you know, only briefly. The Pat McGrath products that are really for me are like the really incredible special shades and those chunky, hefty, beautiful Mothership palettes. I'm sure that I would love one of those. And I've never been able to bring myself to spend that amount of money. In my mind, I've always felt, and I'll talk about this later in the video because we're going to talk about Pat McGrath's holiday release. I've always thought that someday the perfect Pat McGrath release is going to come onto the market. And when that day comes, I will probably go ahead and buy it for review, you know, or buy it for myself or buy it for review. I don't feel like that day has quite come. All I'm saying is that it doesn't make sense for me to be like, I want this, I want to buy this, or to think about actually buying it, or to spend any of my budget for self-sponsored review on it. It doesn't make sense to do that because it's Gucci. We have no idea about their eyeshadow formula. It's totally untested. And there's this other brand that I've always been into that has really expensive eyeshadow palettes that I've always been curious about, it would make much more sense for me to buy for myself or buy for review or anything. I'm just putting that out in the front of what I'm about to say about this palette so that we can all go into this moment in the video with a little bit of perspective. Okay, that said, let's start with the packaging. It's very large. It's like this huge and big thing with these black with flowers on it. I can't even like look at the picture. It hurts. And then inside of it is this extremely confusing and alluring situation, which is that the eyeshadow pan, the whole tray of eyeshadows looks like it's set into this piece of packaging that kind of looks like a vintage hand mirror. And I can't tell whether there's like a secret compartment underneath there. I think that might be what it is. Or if the tray of eyeshadows pops out and can be replaced with another tray of eyeshadows and maybe can be replaced with like a refill of a tray of eyeshadows. Maybe it's that kind of thing. But whatever is going on, I'm extremely intrigued by this like thumb wedge hole underneath the tray of eyeshadows that implies that it can be lifted up or popped out. It's just giving me very like precious childhood memorabilia vibes, like a weird old piece of packaging or like jewelry box or something that like an aunt gave to someone, and it ended up like 50 years later dusty, like in my attic, in my garret room when I was a wee babe. I actually do feel like there were things like this in my childhood that were very precious to me, just like little objects, hinged objects that opened and closed and had secret compartments in. Not actually makeup, but there's just something about it. It's giving me my own past vibes. So there's that. Like there's just all of that, which has nothing to do with the actual makeup. But I feel like they've actually done a really good job putting this palette together. It's got a really dark charcoal black in it. It's got this sort of like beige shadow in it. So already there's like a dynamic range from light to dark. Then it has a pretty broad selection of grungy neutral shades. So this kind of like rich reddish brown, rich plum, kind of a mauvey taupe, kind of a taupey brown, like all of those shades that I really love and depend on. And when if I ever were to open this and look at it and I just needed something quick, there are actually plenty of shades that are the kind of thing that I reach for over and over. So it checks that box. Then it has some color, this like really creamy looking, rich purple, shiny purple, amethyst, and then this beautiful, bright cerulean, like sky blue. That's a super bright matte, which, you know, I don't use colorful mattes that often, but this is among the handful of colors that I am really drawn to in a matte formula. I don't know how they did that. I mean, somebody over at Gucci has got my number. And then there's this shiny kind of like goldy silver shade, which is another thing that I really love. And then on top of all of that, which would be enough, they also managed to include an entire array of sort of like rosy, sort of like bright rosy neutral shades. So there's like a matte peach, a shiny peach, and then there's this matte called anemone orange that's like a rusty, very alluring, rusty, sophisticated orangey matte. It's like everything. I could have seen myself putting this together, and it, like the color story together, it just feels like it's absolutely singing. I think that they've done a gorgeous job. Okay, I just do. Everything about it is speaking to me. And I've got to say, this is the first piece of makeup in a long time, first of all, that has made me feel the way that I've felt every time I've looked at this. But you should have seen me the first time I looked at it. I got that like heart leaping, like palm sweaty feeling that I talk about, that I've learned during my no buy year you should never listen to right away. You know, like it's important to me never to buy makeup when I'm feeling that way, because I just don't have perspective when I'm feeling that way. But it's just been a long time since a piece of makeup made me actually feel that way. And I still clearly am all stirred up. So this is the first, it's been a long time since I felt that way. And it's also been a long time since I felt like I wanted to put a piece of makeup on my Christmas wish list, like on my wish list for my family. But I think that this is going to go on there. And, you know, I mean, I don't know. It's wildly expensive. I don't know if anyone would actually like get it for me as a gift, and whether they do or don't doesn't matter. You know what I mean? All I'm saying is like, that's how much I want it. And it's definitely saying something. I mean, again, like beautiful makeup comes and beautiful makeup goes, and I have a lot of eyeshadow. And I usually really stick to my guns about really not needing more. In fact, I feel like I've duped some of the vibes of this already in here. Like there's a lot in common, especially if I were to put like a blue in here. But it's not about that, I feel like, for this. It's like about the whole package. And I just don't usually get like this. I don't usually get like giddy about a thing like this. But we don't know anything, again, about this formula. I mean, Gucci, since they revamped their makeup line, they haven't come out with eyeshadows. It could be terrible. They could be like completely underpigmented. It could be that the shiny ones don't shine. It could be that the black doesn't perform. It could be that the mattes don't perform. I don't know. But to be completely honest, if I find out that the formula is bad, that the shadows don't perform, I'll probably be disappointed instead of relieved. You would think that I would be relieved because I'd be like, oh, then that's good. I don't have to want it anymore. But I actually would just feel like it's a crying shame, because I just love it when something is done exquisitely well. And I love it when something is done exquisitely well in that slightly slant, slightly sideways way that aligns with my aesthetic. You know, it's not just like, oh, I could make this work for my aesthetic. It's like everything about it is speaking to me. And it's not that often that something like that comes along in beauty, let alone in luxury beauty. So I will be following the future career of this release, say it with me, with great interest. Okay, calming down, moving on. Sephora favorites holiday sets are available now in September before Halloween. It's like we're like a month away from Halloween already. You can buy these holiday themed palettes in Sephora. And I included them to say one thing, which is just that I am very drawn to this like retro aesthetic. It's like a 1950s holiday decoration aesthetic. Makes me think of I Dream of Jeannie, that type of thing. Very, it's like not nostalgic. I feel like nostalgia isn't quite the word if you weren't alive then, you didn't quite live through it. But it is a little bit nostalgic for me of media that I've consumed that's from that time, you know? And here's the thing, it's a point of interest. This is my hot take. I feel like it's been a long time since we saw this vintage aesthetic in makeup or in beauty at large, or like fashion at large, in this exact way. I feel like for a long time we've been on the like very clean, minimalist, sharp, polished packaging kind of train. And this represents an absolute about face from that. And I wonder if it has something to do with the fact that we've just gone through like a really challenging and sort of traumatizing year and a half in this world. Like we've all been getting through this pandemic together. When dealing with something like that, or after dealing with something like that, like cultural trauma or cultural challenge, we want comfort. And as far as I understand it, that kind of like visceral need, that like need for comfort is often reflected in the art that's produced, the media that's produced, and that trickles down to the way in which things are advertised, because, you know, companies are trying to appeal to that desire or appeal to that trend. So I wonder if that's what's going on here. I wonder if the sort of like the stark quality of the minimalist aesthetic isn't feeling like the mother's milk that we need right now, like the comfort that we need right now. And so people who are, you know, specialists in advertising and who follow trends in people's desires and what people are the most drawn to are realizing that they need to go in this sort of like halcyon days, like nostalgic, sparkly aesthetic direction. Or maybe I'm totally overthinking it and someone in the Sephora advertising department was like, let's just try 1950s font this year. Maybe people will bite. In any case, I'm not going to be buying any of these because I do not like these little dinky minis of things. I do not like just a little teeny tiny bullet of, you know, 1 millimeter of lipstick that just like rattles around in its teeny tiny tube and you're just like, and they're like piling up and drowning you. I don't really like that kind of thing. I just feel like these are the kinds of things that you get for free throughout the year. And here's my other hot take about this. Sephora is like, these are our favorites, our best-selling products. Like, you're going to love them so much. But don't you think that probably behind the scenes, the brands are like vying to be included in this kind of box? Because what a brand wants, I think, and I think this is also why a brand would provide like minis to be like free samples at Sephora or 100-point perks or something. The brand wants to get its free samples in the hands of consumers. The brand wants consumers to try the product because maybe they'll fall in love with it and then they'll repurchase. But also it's like once you've tried a brand, then that brand has sort of become part of your story, part of your life. And then you're more likely to try something else from that brand or buy something else from that brand. So it's very much in the brand's interest to be included in these boxes. So I wonder if Sephora is like behind the scenes wheeling and dealing, like what are you going to give to us for the honor of being, the benefit of being included in our favorites kit. And that makes me think that these kits, it has more to do with which brands have the money or the clout or whatever it is to buy a spot in these boxes and less to do with Sephora like being so kind as to curate a little box of favorites just for you, just so you can get a deal in the holiday season. Which is not to say that they're not thinking about what's going to appeal to consumers, but I just think that they're thinking about that in balance with whatever wheeling and dealing is going on behind the scenes. And this might be hearsay. I'm just totally making this up. This is definitely a hot take, but maybe somebody out there does know more about this than I do and can confirm or deny. I'm as unenthused about discussing this today as I was yesterday, but I'll just do it quickly. This thing about SMASHBOX taking over BECCA, and I'm sure that it would be I'd be singing a different song if I was like deeply dependent on the BECCA under eye concealer, for example. And I know that a lot of people really love this product and they're really sad that they weren't going to have access to it anymore. If you think about a product that I really love, like the Sephora Bright Fuchsia Green Color Corrector, which I think is being discontinued. If SMASHBOX was suddenly like, we have taken over and we're going to start producing and selling the Sephora Bright Fuchsia Green Color Corrector, I would probably be excited because I'd be like, yay, I can keep buying it and I don't need to look for another green color corrector. I don't have that relationship with either of these BECCA products that SMASHBOX is going to begin selling, the Shimmery Skin Perfector Pressed or the Under Eye Brightening Corrector. So that's the grain of salt with which you should take what I'm about to say. But what I'm about to say is this. It just feels like not flogging a dead horse, but like the horse was like, let's spend one last year together. I'm really old. I'm ready to go. And we were all like, okay, it's been real. You've been such a good, lovely horse. You've given us so many wonderful pony rides. We're just like winding down together and it's going to be fine. And we're like taking the saddle off the horse, giving it one last nice brushing to make it feel good. And it's about to, you know, ride off into the sunset and go to horsey heaven. And then SMASHBOX comes along and is like, no, horse, get over here into our pastures. We'll fatten you up. We'll put saddles back on you. Go, go, go. And it just feels like we were just about to like let it rest. And it's like things fade, things change, life goes on, all things must perish from under the sun. And can we not just like let that be okay? Like, can we as people not just let it be okay that nothing is permanent? Like that is how I feel about this. And I'm sure that that's not what was going on over here. I'm sure that SMASHBOX is just like, if we sell these things, we'll make money because people will buy them. They just like picked the things from BECCA that the sales are still really good. And they're like, we can earn more coin this way. I'm sure that it's all just about money. But to me, who has like this emotional landscape of investment in what goes on in the beauty community, that's how I felt about it. That was the hot take of my feelings, that I was just kind of like, must we continue to push so hard? Must we strain ourselves to force everything around us to conform to our will? Smashbox. Finally, let's talk about the Pat McGrath holiday release. So I sort of foreshadowed this earlier when I was saying that I've been like waiting for the perfect Pat McGrath release to come along so that I can just be a part of it. You know what I mean? It's just not in my nature to spend so much money on something that I don't feel is perfectly in line with my aesthetic and then I'm not going to get a lot of use out of. So last year when she announced this like larger palette with smaller pans for less money, I was really excited for a moment and I thought I would review it, and then it didn't have any special shades in it. And I can't tell whether that's happening this year. I can't tell whether the Celestial Odyssey palette has special shades in it or not. They look pretty special in the swatches. They look very special, but I don't know if they're like the special shades, and it doesn't make sense for me to acquire or review some Pat McGrath makeup unless it has those special shades in it, because that's what everyone's always saying I would love. So I'm not sure whether that is the right choice or not for me. I've always kind of thought that when the right thing came along, it would be a quad that had like a couple of special shades in it and maybe like one matte and one really beautiful metallic. And maybe one of these quads is that. The one that has the blue in it, it looks like the blue could be a special shade. But I can't remember, I don't follow closely enough to know if she ever releases the special shades in quads or if it's only in the Mothership. I think for a long time it was only in Mothership palettes, and then a couple quads came out that had one or two of them in. But again, I can't tell if either of these quads includes special shades. The sort of rosy neutral one looks like it doesn't, but again, maybe it does. A little hard to tell from these swatches. So I guess what I'm saying is, let me know now if you think any of these 3 eyeshadow releases from Pat McGrath might be the one for me to finally review, like finally acquire and review. Now that you know what it is I'm looking for, maybe we can all keep an eye out. And you can let me know if you think the perfect quad or palette comes out from Pat McGrath. It's tough with the Motherships just because they're so expensive. I'm sure that there are a couple of those that I would love and that I would really enjoy using, but I don't know. It's partly that they're so expensive, and it's partly that as beautiful as some of them have been, not one of them has come along and really like grabbed me by the lapels and been like, I was created for you, Hannah Louise Poston. And at that price, I'm kind of waiting for that. So maybe it'll be that, but maybe it'll be one of these. Maybe it'll be one of the things in this holiday release. Let me know what you think. All right, I'm gonna go. I did it. I gave my hot takes. Again, I guess they were a little bit less hot than they were yesterday, but maybe a little bit more rational, maybe a little bit more sensical, maybe a little bit less chaotic than I was yesterday. No matter what, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed being here. And I really, really hope that you are remembering to take extra good care of yourself so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.